All right, so let's dive into something I know you've all been working on.
Yeah.
Becoming more fluent in English.
It's such a...
Think of this deep dive as your personalized fluency coach, guiding you towards clearer, more confident communication.
Love that.
We'll be pulling from an episode of the Do You Know podcast.
Okay.
It's hosted by Jack and features language expert Emma.
Great.
It's packed with tips and even has like a really fun challenge you can try right away.
Awesome.
I think one of the things I really liked about this episode is how it tackles this question so many English learners have. Like, what does it really mean to be fluent?
Yeah, it's easy to get bogged down with all the rules and the
That's-
vocabulary lists.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
It's so much more than just knowing the technicalities.
Exactly. In the podcast, Emma actually describes fluency as being able to communicate smoothly and confidently without constantly stumbling over your words.
Right.
She even compares it to dancing. It's not about flawlessly executing every single step.
Yeah.
It's about moving gracefully and expressively.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really captures the feeling, right?
Yeah.
That effortless flow of communication that we're all kind of striving for.
Totally. And what's so refreshing about her approach is that she moves away from this idea of perfection
Oh, yeah.
that so many learners get hung up on.
For sure.
Fluency isn't about speaking perfectly.
Right.
It's about feeling comfortable and natural in the language.
Okay, so we have this vision of fluency in mind.
Yeah.
Where do we begin?
Right.
What are some practical steps we can take to get there?
Well, in the podcast, Emma has some really useful advice.
Okay.
She suggests starting with vocabulary that's directly relevant to your everyday life.
Okay.
So think about your work, your hobbies,
Uh-huh.
your daily routines, the things you talk about regularly.
That makes a lot of sense because if you're learning words that you'll actually use,
Yes.
they're going to stick with you so much better.
It's about making those words meaningful.
She gave a really clear example in the podcast.
Yeah.
Instead of simply memorizing the word meeting,
Okay.
which can be kind of dry, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You learn phrases like, we have a meeting at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
or I need to prepare for the meeting.
Right.
Learning in context like this helps you naturally incorporate those words into your everyday speech.
Okay, so we've started building up our vocabulary,
Yes.
but how do we make those words stick?
Right.
We all know how easy it is to forget new vocabulary.
You're absolutely right. It can be a real struggle.
It is.
But Emma has some really clever tips for conquering vocabulary retention.
Okay.
One of the most interesting ones involves turning learning into a game.
Oh, I'm all ears. Gamifying learning always makes things more fun.
Right. It takes the pressure off and lets you tap into that playful side of learning.
Yeah.
So in the podcast, she suggests picking 5 new words each day
Okay.
and challenging yourself to use them.
In conversations, or even writing a short story that incorporates all 5.
I could see how that would be effective
Yeah,
because you're not just passively memorizing the words.
exactly.
You're actively trying to use them in creative ways.
Yes. And it forces you to think about the nuances of each word.
Yeah.
The different meanings, the
Yeah.
connotations,
Yes.
how it fits into different contexts.
For sure.
Have you heard of spaced repetition?
I have.
Okay.
There are some great apps out there,
There are.
like Anki and Quizlet, that use this technique
Yes.
to help you review words at just the right intervals to maximize retention.
Those apps can be really helpful, but the key is to find a method that works best for you.
Yeah.
Whether it's flashcards or writing or even recording yourself using those new words and sentences,
Right.
it's that active engagement that truly solidifies those words in your memory.
I think one of the biggest hurdles for many language learners,
Yes.
and I've definitely experienced this myself,
Uh-huh.
is that fear of making mistakes when speaking.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
can be so paralyzing.
That fear is so real, and it can hold people back from actually using the language.
Yeah.
But the way Emma reframes this fear in the podcast is so empowering.
I'm curious to hear how she approaches it. What does she suggest?
She emphasizes that mistakes are not failures.
Okay.
They're actually valuable learning opportunities. She encourages learners to embrace their mistakes as stepping stones on their path to fluency.
It's about changing our perspective.
It is.
Instead of seeing mistakes as something to be ashamed of,
Right.
we can view them as opportunities to grow and improve.
Exactly. And she provides some really practical tips for getting over that fear of speaking.
Yeah.
One of her suggestions, which I thought was brilliant, is to simply talk to yourself in English.
Oh.
Just describe your actions throughout the day.
You mean like narrating your life as you go about your day?
Yes.
I've heard of people doing that.
It might sound a little silly.
Yeah.
But think of it as a private rehearsal space.
Right.
Where you can experiment with the language without any judgment.
Yeah.
You could say things like, I'm making breakfast now, or I'm going for a walk in the park.
Right.
Simple things.
Yeah.
But it gets you comfortable producing the sounds and forming sentences.
It's a great way to get those words flowing without that pressure of being judged or corrected.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Right. And for those who are ready to branch out a bit, she also recommends exploring language exchange platforms.
Yeah.
Like Tandem or Hello Talk, where you can connect with native English speakers and practice in a supportive environment.
Those platforms can be fantastic resources for getting real-world speaking practice.
For sure.
And building confidence.
Sometimes we just need like a quick, fun exercise to flex our fluency muscles.
Yes.
Something we can do right now wherever we are.
Well, you're in luck. In the podcast, Emma introduces a challenge she calls the 1-minute challenge.
Okay. This sounds intriguing.
Okay.
What is it all about?
It's incredibly simple but surprisingly effective.
Right.
You choose any object around you. It could be your phone, a pen, a book, anything.
Okay.
And you talk about it in English for a full minute.
That's a great idea. I can see how that would really push you to think on your feet.
Yes.
And come up with different ways to describe things.
Exactly.
Right.
The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to keep talking.
Yeah.
Keep those words flowing. You can describe the object's color, shape, texture, how you use it, why it's important to you.
Yeah.
Anything that comes to mind.
This is a fantastic way to practice thinking and speaking in English. And it's something anyone can do right now.
Exactly. It's about making fluency a part of your everyday life.
Right.
Finding those little moments to engage with the language and push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
This has been a really encouraging start.
Good.
I'm already feeling more motivated to work on my fluency.
That's fantastic to hear. Remember, fluency is a journey, not a race. It's about embracing those small victories along the way.
So true. And on that note, we're going to take a quick pause, but don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.
When we come back, we'll delve even deeper into some powerful strategies for unlocking your English fluency.
Yes.
And making it a part of your everyday life.
We'll be back in a flash.
Welcome back to our deep dive on English fluency. We're still unpacking some really valuable advice from Emma, the language expert featured on the Do You Know podcast. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to step up my language game.
Me too. One of the things that really struck me in the podcast was Emma's emphasis on personalizing the learning journey.
Yeah.
She really encourages us to identify our why, what's driving us to learn English in the first place.
Oh, I remember that part. She's right. It's so easy to get swept up in these like generic learning methods.
Right.
But figuring out your personal motivation, whether it's travel work, connecting with loved ones, or even just personal growth, can make a huge difference in how you approach learning.
Absolutely. It's like having a roadmap tailored specifically for you.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to travel, maybe you start by learning phrases like, could you tell me how to get to, or what are some must-see attractions?
Right.
If you're learning for work, you'll want to focus on industry-specific vocabulary or how to write a professional email.
Right. It's about making the language relevant to your life.
Exactly.
If you're learning things you're actually interested in and will use, becomes so much more engaging and the progress feels more tangible.
I completely agree. And this ties in nicely with Emma's point about immersing yourself in the language as much as possible.
Immersion.
Yes.
That's a word you hear a lot in the language learning world.
You do.
But it doesn't necessarily mean packing your bags and moving to an English-speaking country, right?
Not at all. Immersion can happen right where you are.
Okay.
Emma talked about surrounding yourself with the language, listening to podcasts like this one, watching movies, reading books, even changing the language settings on your phone.
Well, that's a good one. Changing your phone settings.
Yeah.
It's such a simple thing, but you're constantly interacting with it.
Yeah.
So you're getting that exposure throughout the day.
Exactly. And you can choose content that aligns with your interests.
Okay.
If you're a news junkie, start reading English news articles or watching international news channels.
Right.
If you love comedies,
Yeah.
watch English sitcoms.
Right.
Find what you enjoy and make it a part of your routine.
It's like sneaking in language practice without even realizing it.
Yes.
I think a lot of people avoid immersion because they think it has to be this big formal thing.
Right.
But it can really be as simple as choosing to watch a movie in English instead of your native language.
You're right. It's about finding those small, manageable ways to weave English into your daily life. Speaking of weaving, Emma also shared this interesting tip about incorporating English into your routines.
Okay.
She suggested thinking in English while doing everyday tasks,
Right.
like cooking or getting ready in the morning.
Okay, so basically trying to switch your internal monologue to English.
Yes,
It's something like a mental workout.
it is in a way,
Yeah.
but it helps train your brain to think in English more naturally without relying on constant translation.
Yeah.
It can be challenging at first, but like any skill, it gets easier with practice.
I love that it's something you can do anywhere, anytime,
Exactly.
without needing any special resources or materials. It's about making those mental connections.
Precisely. And while immersion and thinking in English are great for passive exposure,
Uh-huh.
Emma also stressed the importance of actively engaging with the language.
Right.
She mentioned a technique called shadowing,
Yeah.
where you listen to a piece of audio and try to repeat it simultaneously,
Oh, yeah.
mimicking the speaker's pronunciation and intonation.
Ah, yes. Shadowing. It's like a vocal workout for your English.
It is.
I've tried it before,
Yeah.
and it really helps you pay attention to the nuances of pronunciation rhythm.
It does. It can feel a bit strange at first, but it's a fantastic way to fine-tune your pronunciation and develop a more natural flow when speaking.
And another active learning technique she discussed was recording yourself speaking English
Yes.
and then listening back to identify areas for improvement. It's like having your own personal language coach in your pocket.
It can be a bit daunting to listen to your own voice at first, but it's incredibly valuable for self-assessment.
Yeah.
You can pinpoint specific pronunciation issues, grammatical errors, or places where your fluency falters.
It takes courage, but it's so worth it.
All right.
You can also track your progress over time,
Yes.
which is really motivating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It helps you become more aware of your strengths and weaknesses as an English speaker. So far, we've covered personalizing your approach, immersion, active listening, and self-assessment. It's like a multi-pronged attack on fluency.
It's amazing how all these techniques connect and build upon each other. I'm starting to see how a little bit of effort each day can really add up.
That's the key takeaway: consistency and a willingness to embrace the journey.
Right.
Fluency isn't a destination you reach overnight.
Yeah.
It's something you build over time.
And it's a journey that should be enjoyable.
It should.
Language learning can open up so many doors and connect you with people and cultures from all over the world.
You're absolutely right. It's about embracing the process, celebrating the small wins, and finding joy in the learning experience. Speaking of celebrating, I think it's time for us to take another short break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll explore some creative techniques that can add even more fun and engagement to your English fluency journey.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our Fluency Deep Dive. We've already unpacked so many valuable strategies from Emma's interview on the Do You Know podcast.
Yeah,
And now,
it's time to get creative.
yes,
We're going to explore some techniques that can inject a dose of fun and imagination into your English learning routine.
yeah, because who says language learning can't be enjoyable? One of the things Emma mentioned that really resonated with me was the power of storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a universal human experience.
It is.
And it can be an incredibly effective way to build fluency.
Absolutely. You don't have to be like the next Shakespeare to benefit from this technique.
Right.
Emma suggested starting with simple exercises like creating short stories, using new vocabulary words you've learned,
Okay.
or think about retelling a familiar story, but this time do it in English.
That's a great idea. I can imagine how it would help solidify those words and grammar structures in your mind. Plus, it gives you a chance to experiment with different styles and tones.
Exactly. And the beauty of storytelling is that it allows you to practice using the language in a meaningful context.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing isolated words and rules.
Right.
It's about seeing how they all come together to create a coherent and engaging narrative.
It's about bringing the language to life.
Yes.
Another fun technique Emma talked about was role-playing. It's such a great way to practice real-life conversations.
It is.
And gain confidence in different situations.
Role-playing can be really transformative. You can imagine scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, or even having a job interview.
Yeah.
All in English.
It's almost like acting, isn't it?
It is.
You step into a different persona
Yes.
and use the language in a dynamic way.
That's a great way to put it. And you can involve friends, family members, or even online language partners.
Right.
The more you practice these real-world scenarios, the more comfortable you'll feel using English spontaneously.
Speaking of engaging techniques,
Yeah.
Emma also highlighted the power of music in language learning.
Yes,
I think we all have that experience of getting a song stuck in our heads.
all the time.
Why not use that to our advantage?
Right.
I mean,
Music is such a fantastic tool. Emma recommended listening to English songs and really paying attention to the lyrics, trying to understand the meaning, and even singing along.
I find that when I listen to music in another language, I naturally start picking up on new words and expressions.
Yeah,
It's like a subconscious form of learning.
it is. And it can be a really fun way to work on pronunciation and rhythm as well.
Yeah.
Music is also incredibly effective for memorization.
Mm,
Think about how easily you can remember the lyrics to your favorite songs.
that's so true.
Yeah.
Music has this way of tapping into our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and those emotions can help anchor new words and phrases in our memory. It's
Yes,
fascinating how our brains work.
it really is. And it's a reminder that language learning is a multisensory experience. We
Right.
can engage our eyes, our ears,
Yeah.
even our bodies through movement and gestures to make the process more enjoyable and effective.
It's all about finding what works best for you.
It is.
Emma emphasized the importance of discovering your own learning style
Yes.
and tailoring your approach accordingly.
Absolutely. Some people are visual learners and might find flashcards or visual aids helpful. Others are auditory learners and thrive on listening to podcasts or conversations.
Yeah.
Still others learn best through kinesthetic activities or hands-on experiences. The key is to experiment and discover what resonates most with you.
It's about making language learning a personalized adventure.
That's beautifully put. And I think that's a perfect message to leave our listeners with.
Okay.
Fluency is not just a destination. It's an ongoing journey of exploration and discovery.
Yeah.
It's about finding your voice in English, expressing yourself confidently and authentically, and enjoying the process along the way.
So well said. And remember, as Emma reminded us, celebrate those small victories.
Yes.
Every step forward, no matter how small it may seem, is a step closer to your goals.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep embracing the joy of communicating in English.
Until next time, happy language learning.